MSU adds 2 more to the 2025 class. What will Charles Taplin and Jayden Savoury add to this year's class? And then, well, hey, who's the next MSU team to make a Final Four? Let's go.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Spartans, your team in green and white 3 days a week in June and July, but the other 10 months of the year, you got that right, 5 days a week. Please rate, review, subscribe, comment below on YouTube how you're feeling about the 2025 class so far, or any questions, any comments, lockedonspartans@gmail.com. We might get to a few mailbag questions at the end of the show, like, hey, who's the next team that's going to reach the Final Four in East Lansing? We're going to rank our frustration potential with each loss this fall. Hey, if you guys got questions, we like to answer them here on Locked On Spartans. So before all that, though, we got to talk some recruiting because, yes, Jonathan Smith, the Michigan State staff, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, added 2 to the 2025 class in the last few days. We're going to start with the one that happened over the weekend. Out of Texas, Red Oaks, that's right, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Charles Taplin, 6'1", 160-pound receiver and return man. We're going to add that too. Again, out of Red Oaks, they play in 5A. That's the second biggest division in Texas football, which is still enough of a population to probably qualify as a country for the Olympics. Those are some massive schools down there in the state of Texas. Now, this is the second straight year that Michigan State and Jonathan Smith and Brian Lindgren have gone fishing down in Texas for a receiver. Last year, they added Jaylen Brown late to the cycle. So shout out to the Lone Star State. Thank you for your wide receivers. Charles Taplin, 3-star, 182nd ranked receiver per the 24/7 Sports Composite. And he picked Michigan State over Washington State and Tulsa. I got to say, the last guy that was a receiver that chose Michigan State over Tulsa ended out pretty okay, until he left for Florida State that one off season. That's right, Keon Coleman. He also picked Michigan State over Tulsa back in the day. So, hey, maybe Michigan State goes 2 for 2 in that. But yes, Taplin, he was slated to visit Washington State. He was going to visit Tulsa. Those visits got canceled because, well, over last week when he visited Michigan State officially, he cemented his commitment with the green and white. So, this is the second wide receiver of this class. This is the second straight week MSU has gotten a commitment in the wide receiver room, joining Braylon Collier out of Ohio. Now, just like Collier, I mean, Taplin mentioned Courtney Hawkins, you know, how he thinks of a family member when he hangs out with him, how he trusts his development with him. So Courtney Hawkins still recruiting strong here in East Lansing. Now, this commitment, just like Braylon Collier, really shows how much this staff is emphasizing speed at the receiver position for this year's class. They haven't really had a lot of kids on this cycle that, you know, possess size, physicality, because they already got those for future classes, right? Guys like Nick Marsh, Antonio Gates Jr., Jaylen Brown is another one too. So this one, they are looking for speed demons. You already got that with Braylon Collier, but man, with Charles Taplin, you got a guy that placed in the top 5 in the 400-meter dash, 4.5A down in Texas. He was part of the silver medalist 4x100 team, and just like you mentioned right at the top, he is a return man. If you go watch his highlight tape, sure, you're going to see him beat some corners, you know, down the streak, catch some nice balls. But boy, it is almost quite literally a blur on your screen when you're watching him return a kickoff. So yes, hey, who knows? Maybe as early as 2025, or if not 2026 or beyond, Charles Taplin could be returning kicks and punts here for Michigan State. Now, he did speak with the fine folks over at Spartans Illustrated, so we're going to pull off just one quote from that piece. Go ahead and subscribe to the fine folks over at Spartans Illustrated. And he mentioned that, you know, hanging out with the coaching staff, that includes Coach Cordell Grundy. He's a graduate assistant, that it just felt like a nice family, wholesome weekend, and he felt really at home. Also commented that, hey, they went bowling on Friday, played some mini golf on Saturday, so it's a far cry from what we were used to the last few years, right? Goats on the field, Ferraris on the field, Lamborghinis on the field. And look, I'll never knock that strategy from Mel Tucker. Hey, if you want to stand out, if you want to add some flash, that's one way to do it. But man, what a 180 this is. We're doing some wholesome family activities here like bowling and mini golf, and that resonated with a lot of recruits so far, including Charles Taplin saying, quote, "I felt like I was with family. Coach Hawkins and Coach Grundy introduced me to their wives and just shows they want to create good relationships." So as we look into the future here, could Taplin, could Collier play immediately in 2025? Yeah, sure, it's possible. Anything's possible, right? But let's look a little further beyond when these two kids are going to be sophomores, the 2026 wide receiver room. If things go according to plans, obviously with the transfer portal these days, you never know, but 2026 could look like Jerron Glover, Nick Marsh, Antonio Gates Jr., Isaiah Johnson, Braylon Collier, Jalen Brown, who we just mentioned too, and now Charles Taplin. So you got your physicality, you got your speed, and that is what we are looking for the 2026 wide receiver room. Now, fast forward a few days, we're going to go to Monday. Jayden Savoury out of Orchard Lake St. Mary's, and that's right, that's the second St. Mary's kid to commit to Michigan State, and also might not be the last. We'll get into that here in a little bit, but he commits to Michigan State on Monday. The 6'6", 220-pound three-star tight end. Yes, he made it official after visiting Michigan State to start this official visit cycle. He started at the way beginning of the month. Afterwards, he was slated to visit Duke, BYU, Kansas, Wisconsin. Not sure if those visits ever materialized because Michigan State made their footing pretty strong right off the bat here. And now what they have, not just their second St. Mary's commit, also joining linebacker Charles White, not just their second tight end commit, joining Emmett Bork out of Wisconsin, but they get a top 40 tight end per the 24/7 Sports Composite and the number 14 overall rated kid in the state of Michigan. Now, what's exciting about Jayden, is not just, the fact that he's a really good player from the state of Michigan, but football is somewhat new to him. Last year was his first year playing football. That's not so bad, and this is just all that he did in that first year playing football. Well, he was scattered all over the field over at St. Mary's. It's kind of a baptism by fire. They had him on the line. They lined him up at H-back, out of the slot at wideout. He was a pawn all over the field. So hopefully that can translate to the next level. He showed a willingness to block, whether it was downfield, whether it was right on the line. And that is only going to be something that gets refined as he plays another year of football, as he shortly gets up to a college coaching staff. And guys, in his first year playing high school football, all Catholic last season. And that is an all Catholic league. That is amongst one of the best, if not the best, in the entire state of Michigan. So he as well spoke to Spartans Illustrated. He said, quote, "I would describe my game as I can do everything. As a tight end, I have a lot of room to work with. I can block in the run and pass game, as well as be a go-to receiver and be a mismatch on small defensive backs. I am also faster than most DBs and linebackers, so it's easy to get open." Go ahead and just watch 40 seconds of his film. That's not just a kid that exudes confidence with those quotes, but certainly backs up everything he's saying. There's a reason that they're moving him all over the field. He is a matchup nightmare, both physically and also athletically. You can see the basketball background with him. And yes, he does have a basketball background. He helped St. Mary's to, I believe, a 34-1 season last year. They were Michigan State champions last year. You can see it on the field, whether it is high pointing the ball, almost boxing the secondary out. But also what I like to see, he is fluid in the run after the catch. So, yes, of course, you're going to have to block if you want to get the rock here in East Lansing. I mean, that goes for a lot of coaching staffs in the country. Jonathan Smith, Brian Lindgren, their offense is no different. But, hey, at the very least, you have another good physical tight end, just like Emmett Bork, standing at a smooth 6'6". And, yes, guys, there is room to grow in his game. So welcome, Mr. Taplin. Welcome, Mr. Savoury. And we're going to talk a little bit more about recruiting here in a hot segment. But first, you need to talk your ears off about eBay Motors. Folks, passion, drive, and patience. The winning formula to winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. We're talking superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you are looking for. And With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time, or it's your hard-earned money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. I'll say that again just because I like that line so much. You are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home the huge wins. So, what are you waiting for out there? Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's keep talking recruiting here, because what does this all mean? What do the two new additions do for the rankings for Michigan State for 2025? Well, 55 nationally, right? And that's not, the flashiest number right there. 9 commits so far. So while most schools in the country have double-digit commits, Michigan State's still working their way up to getting double-digit commits. So they're number 55 nationally, number 14 in the Big Ten. But let's add some context to those numbers there, to those stats right there. Because amongst this class so far, out of the 9 kids, you have the best 2 linebackers in the state of Michigan, Damari Malone out of Macomb, Dakota, and then Charles White, who we just mentioned, Orchard Lake, St. Mary's. You have the best tight end in the state of Michigan, guy we just talked about, Jayden Savoury, and also right in your backyard at East Lansing High School, you have the best running back in the state too, Jace Clarizio. That's not a bad 4-pack right there of kids from the state of Michigan. One of the concerns with this staff, Jonathan Smith, is yes, he comes from Oregon State. We're feeling great about the hire. He has shown he can develop a program, develop players, he can rebuild. You guys, if you've listened to one episode this offseason, you know we are very high on the Jonathan Smith hiring. But one of the few concerns we had is, holy crap, this is great that he's bringing over a lot of guys from Oregon State. But how about anyone regional? Is that going to be an issue with recruiting? How can he make inroads in a place that he, quite frankly, doesn't really know? Well, how about this for year one in your full cycle is getting 4 of the best kids from the state of Michigan. Not too shabby. Still more to come too. And this tweet from friend of the program, Maxwell Klitsky, paints this in a really nice picture from what we are doing now as opposed to the last few years. Now, the tweet reads, crude research but found a more positive trend for MSU recruiting. 2023 commits in the month of June 2022. So a full year ahead of the 2023 class. At this point, they only had 5 kids committed, whereas this year they have 9 kids committed to their 2025 class. Maxwell also goes to write on, 2025 commits will need to have good senior years for a decent bump, but Smith and company are finding guys they want and closing early. That is not just spin zone. It's not just wearing green tinted glasses. That is a legitimate approach to recruiting and how Jonathan Smith wants to build this class. And this is something that we've been talking about here even since before official visit season. It is making that bedrock of your class. Not having dinner on Thanksgiving and wondering, hey, why do we only have 9 kids in our class right now? Because, hey, you hosted a bunch of kids in June and they went elsewhere, and then you don't really have a plan B. Hey, where are all these kids that kind of fit the profile, guys that we can trust, that we can develop here? That's an issue that the last staff had in that 2023 class that Maxwell Klitsky brought up, that we have brought up many times in the show. It got to late November, and they were lacking numbers. And they're just throwing out offers to a bunch of plan B or C kids that they, quite frankly, some of them they've never even met before, offering them. So now you have a strong foundation being made. You have 9 commits for the class right now. I know that we all want the 4 stars, the 5 stars. But right now, where with Michigan State is at, guys, we have to have an honest look at the program right now. Back-to-back bowl gameless seasons. This is where you start right here, all right? Identifying guys that you want. Screw the rankings, no matter what they say, says Jonathan Smith and their staff. We're going to find guys we want, which will be a theme in every class from here on out. But as you work higher and higher up the win totals, then maybe that's where you get more of your 4 stars. But right now, yes, we're at square one with the rebuild. This is what happens. So that is what we got for Jonathan Smith and the rest of the staff. Now, going off Maxwell's tweet about guys that, hey, if they have good senior years, they can get a decent bump in the recruiting rankings. I'm just going to go ahead and mailbag question this myself. I'm just going to say, all right, well, who are some guys that I think can see a bump this upcoming year, in my opinion? I've got 4 guys written down right now, so almost half the class. I'm not just going to go up here and say, hey, all 9 kids. I mean, that would be real homer podcasting right there. But right now, just right off the top, Jace Clarizio, he already got a bump from the guys at On 3. Like, he's already a 4-star according to that recruiting service over there. But beyond that, I can see Leo Hannon, the quarterback out of Servite, California, getting a bump. I mean, we just talked in the first segment how the Detroit Catholic League is one of the best leagues in the state of Michigan. Where Leo Hannon plays, Servite, California, they play in one of the best leagues, not just in California, but arguably the whole country. All right, so if he has a strong senior season, maybe not a 4-star bump, but a high 3-star, not somewhere in the middle of the 700s, which is where I believe he is right now. I can see him getting a nice friendly bump. Jayden Savoury, I mean, this is a guy we just talked about. And yes, it was his first year of football last year. Well, let's see what another year does. Could he shoot up even higher in the rankings? And then Braylon Collier out of Sandusky, Ohio. I got to say, guys, the more I watch his film, that is a game that I really like. And of course, hey, what do they want in this class? Just a bunch of speed. When you hear that, you think, okay, just slot receivers, guys that could do screens, the old, the famous jet sweep, perhaps. I got to say, though, not to put, extreme pressure and expectations on this kid, but you're watching his junior year tape, and it's like he's making some Jayden Reed-esque catches. Kind of a similar build, too. Undersized on the field, but my goodness gracious, is that a 6'5" guy going up for a jump ball, or is that a guy that's humming around 6 feet? I see a lot of comparisons with Collier and Jayden Reed. Of course, by the time Jayden Reed got to college, he stayed a 3-star. And Braylon Collier, I mean, I think it was his dad that said on Twitter that he doesn't go to showcases or many things like that. That's how you get bumped up in rankings quite often. So we'll see if he ever does get a bump up in rankings. But I got to say, I'm buying low right now on Braylon Collier. I do really like his game. Now, some other recruiting news and notes here. Justin Bell just got an offer from Michigan State, and that changes his plans this weekend. He was going to visit Kansas this week, but now will be visiting Michigan State this weekend after getting an offer early in the week. Now, who on earth is Justin Bell? Well, if you see him, you can't miss him, because this is a 6'8", 290-pound offensive tackle from, just like Damari Malone, Macomb, Dakota. So Michigan State's front yard is where he is from. He has scrubbed the Kansas visit. He has already visited Indiana. He has visited West Virginia. So some Power 4 offers. But yes, at a smooth 6'8", 290 pounds, he will be visiting Michigan State this weekend. And hey, if this visit goes well, it certainly seems like there's a lot of smoke around a commitment right now. The folks at Rivals, all right, the folks at 24/7 Sports, the folks at On 3, they have already started to log predictions for Mr. Bell to commit to Michigan State. Might have to wait for this weekend. Hopefully the visit goes well. So, yeah, just to put that on everyone's radar right now. So, for the offensive line recruiting really quick, you already have Drew Nichols, all right, out of California, interior offensive lineman. You also had some other interior offensive line visitors, like out of Utah, Darius Afalava, out of Hawaii, Houston Taurus. And you're also this weekend going to get a visit from tackle Antonio Johnson, who, that's right, everyone take a drink, from Orchard Lake St. Mary's. So this could be a 3-pack of Orchard Lake St. Mary's players here this weekend, but that is where we stand with offensive line recruiting. Now, switching sides of the ball here really quick. Linebacker recruiting, just to go down there, we already got Charles White. We already got Damari Malone. Bradley Gompers, he visited earlier this official visit cycle. Looks like he will not be playing for Michigan State in the future. He committed to Duke over the weekend. Now, however, Grant Bierman, he visited last week. This is a guy we talked about a little bit before the weekend. Rivals has him ranked as a 4-star linebacker, top 30 outside linebacker in the country. He's going to visit West Virginia this weekend. He has already visited Purdue. He's visited Cincinnati. But hey, we've got a linebacker spot open, clearly, especially one that's a 4-star, top 30 kid, and he's known Joe Rossi for quite some time. This isn't, hey, I'm at Michigan State, this is the first time we're meeting. No, Joe Rossi has had Bierman on his radar since Rossi was defensive coordinator at Minnesota, so we'll see if anything transpires there after he takes his visit to West Virginia this weekend. And really quick, just to put a bow on recruiting talk, over the weekend, Chris McCorkle, defensive back out of Florida, highly rated 3-star. Like, he is right on the cusp of being a 4-star. He visits Michigan State, and the Indiana commit, well, would you look at that? He decommits from Indiana. He probably sent that tweet out as he was at the airport, fresh off of his Michigan State visit. But this is where it gets interesting, is that I've heard this from multiple people now at this point, is that there might not be a correlation between the decommitment from Indiana and committing to Michigan State, despite him just taking an official visit to MSU. Seems like the interest there might not be there. So we'll keep an eye on Chris McCorkle, because that was a guy that, as he officially visits last weekend, you're thinking, oh, great, maybe flip watch. Oh my goodness, he just tweeted out that he decommitted from Indiana. This is all showing up great for Michigan State. And then apparently that might not even be the case. He is going to visit Iowa next weekend. So just to put that on your board too, and put a bow in recruiting. All right, as we head into the mailbag here, guys, there's a few ways to get a hold of us if you have a mailbag question. Sheehan_sports on Twitter, LockedOnSpartans@gmail.com. Or if you are Lawrence out there, well, hey, my brother might coach his son in baseball. So Lawrence goes up to my brother. He says, hey, I got a mailbag questions to, just ping off your brother right here. So that is the third way that you can get a mailbag question over to us. Flag my brother down at an end of the year high school baseball banquet, and then ask your question. But no, Lawrence, appreciate the question. This is going to be a good one here. This is going to cause a lot of debate, I think, too, because he asked, in the words of my brother, so we're playing a game of telephone here, amongst these teams, who is the next to make a Final Four out of East Lansing? Is it hockey? Is it men's basketball? Is it women's basketball? Is it football? Or is it baseball? So we're going to go ahead and just rank them really quick here. I got to go most likely, in my opinion, number one, hockey, for a few reasons. The first, sure, just like numbers alone, like there are only 64 Division I hockey teams. So that plays into Michigan State's hand right there. But more importantly, Adam Nightingale has this program trending in the right direction. They were just one game away from a Frozen Four last year. Not too shabby. Oh, and by the way, you could very well be getting your, stud goaltender Trey Augustine back next season. And what plays in the playoffs is white-hot goaltending. And, hey, maybe Artem Lezhnov, too, if he comes back. We'll see. They're talking about him being a top 5, if not top 3 draft pick next year. So we'll see what happens there. But nevertheless, I got to like hockey just because of the way they're trending. And also, just 64 teams, only 16 get invited to the NCAA tournament, of course. But, man, Michigan State, even though they play in a very tough Big Ten, could very well be in that position next year. Number 2, this is where the debate really starts here. I think hockey is clear in a way the number 1 most likely to make a Final Four next. But I'm going to go with men's basketball number 2. And I know they've driven me crazy up a wall. They've driven you up a wall out there, Michigan State fans, because it's been an underwhelming stretch here for Tom Izzo and our Michigan State basketball Spartans. But guys, who knows? Like, there are so many if possibilities, right? Like, if Jeremy Fears is truly back to being 100% after getting shot in the leg last year, or if Xavier Booker can be a consistent, we'll call it 14-point player per night, if Frankie Fiddler can transition from the Summit League over to the Big Ten, if Carson Cooper, if Jackson Kohler have shown any signs of progress in this offseason, if Jaden Akins can blossom at that 2 position, if your bench can actually be consistent contributors, if Trey Holloman can once again be around a 40% three-point shooter. Guys, that's a lot of ifs. Or, God, even if one of the freshmen can be an instant impact. That's so many ifs where it's almost a coin toss for a lot of the things I just said. Let's say 80% of those ifs I just said land. Okay, well, then Michigan State could very well be a top 5 seed, if not better, next year. You could also say, well, what if only 20% of those ifs turn out to be true? Then, well, that's going to be a different topic of conversation. But right now, if that all works out, you still got Tom Izzo on your bench, who has an immaculate record in the second game of weekend tournaments. Sure, the North Carolina game didn't work out last year. That's because North Carolina was really good. You also had a point guard that was very interested in airballing more layups than making them, but I digress. Nevertheless, I think Michigan State men's basketball, second best chance to make the next Final Four. And then number 3, women's basketball is who I'm going to go with. Now, this is still maybe a few years away, because women's basketball, by and large, is still pretty top-heavy. You got to go all the way back to 2016 to find the last Final Four team that had a 4 seed or higher to make the Final Four. Ever since then, you got to be a top 3 seed to make the Final Four in women's basketball. And while Coach Robin Freilich had a great first year at Michigan State, has a history of winning. It is still a big climb up there. I mean, last year, they're right with North Carolina in that opening round game. And then what did North Carolina do the very next game against national champion South Carolina? They got beat by 40. That is a big gap to close between where, the middle of the pack teams are in women's hoops and where the elite of the elite are. But you don't have to play South Carolina every single second round every single year, so you have that going for you. So that's, women's basketball, number 3. Number 4, I'm going to go with football, point blank. I think it's a rebuild. I don't think the Final Four is going to happen this year, and what is making it even maybe potentially harder, I don't know, we'll see, is that the fact that it is a 12-team playoff this year. So, hey, let's say that you host a Southern team. Let's say Ole Miss, they stumble on that 12 seed. Michigan State, they're the 5 seed. They get to host a Southern team at Spartan Stadium in December. That will be must-see TV. Let's say they buzz through the running Rebels. Well, shoot, you're still only in the Elite 8 then, right? You still have to face one of the top 4 teams elsewhere. Guys, we just talked women's basketball being very top-heavy. Football is incredibly top-heavy too. So it's going to be a tough climb to make a Final Four. Could it happen? Absolutely. Might be a few years. And then number 5 for this conversation, I got baseball, point blank period. I'm going to make the Final Four in the U.S. Amateur Golf Tournament before baseball reaches a Final Four in the College World Series. So, not to be negative, but I'm very low on baseball right now, as probably many people are. Now, over the weekend, we had a great chat with Chris Vanini of The Athletic. We were talking what games can neither team afford to lose. We threw out MSU, Maryland, and then we also threw out that, hey, you know what, there's not going to be a chance for Michigan State to have a game where we're demanding Coach Jonathan Smith's firing. So this is where Francis writes in, again, lockedonspartans@gmail.com. What games would you actually be legitimately disappointed if Michigan State loses next year? That's a good thought experiment, because right now, in June, roughly 2-ish months away from the season starting, we're calm, we're collected, we're level-headed. Right now, I'm saying, year 1 of Jonathan Smith, hey, I'm not going to let a lot of losses bother me, should they happen, But I know full well in the moment, I'm an irrational adult. I am a child inside of a 32-year-old man's body. So, yes, of course, if Michigan State loses, this all goes out the window. In the moment, I'm going to be pretty fired up. But nevertheless, let's rank them. Rank them from 12 to 1 of how frustrated we would be, which is, right off the top, not that frustrated for these first 2 games, all the way down to you never hear from me ever again. So I broke it up into categories. The first 2 games are no sleep loss. I will not lose sleep if they lose to Oregon or Ohio State. Okay, those are my 12 and 11 ranked games right here. Now, number 10, pretty annoyed. I think it's going to happen. I don't see Michigan State beating Michigan in year 1. I know it's going to maybe frustrate a few Michigan State fans hearing that. I want nothing more than to be run on that, but yeah, so that's the 10th most frustrated I'll be, just because I think there's still quite a gap to close between MSU and Michigan. Now, this other tier, this third tier, shouldn't be mad, but I will be if it should happen. Number 9 at Maryland, start of the year. I know Talia Tagovailoa is no longer the quarterback there, but here's something sneaky about Maryland next year. They will have a pretty good defense next year. That is just the second game for Michigan State for Jonathan Smith. That is a road game, and I know that no one's going to mistake College Park for playing in Autzen Stadium or anything like that, but still, that's a road game. That's challenging. Should they lose that? Shouldn't be frustrated, but that will nag a little bit. Just like number 8, I'm going to go with Iowa. That'd be a little annoying. And then number 7, at Boston College. Early season game, non-conference, on the road, but against a beatable opponent that is just like you, undergoing a rebuild, but not like you. I think Boston College has a little further to go in their rebuild, being a perennial 6-6 program than Michigan State does. But hey, again, we'll cross that bridge should we get there, should Michigan State lose that game. Now, the next tier I have broken up, categorized as just November games, subject to change based on injuries and vibes of the season. Like, you know what, at Illinois, that'd be frustrating because Illinois you should beat this year. However, it is on the road. So that's why I have these 3 games ahead of them as far as frustration goes. Like Rutgers. All right, that's home, end of the season, senior day. We'll see how banged up Michigan State is, but also Rutgers. But nevertheless, Rutgers will have a strong defense this year. Number 4, I would have a hard time losing to Purdue Friday night at home. All right, I get it. Purdue should be like okay this year. Still, that's a home game. Friday night, you should be able to beat them. Number 3, Indiana. That's a game you have to beat. And now we're getting into the territory where should you lose that game, almost no matter the situation of the season, that would be a hard one to swallow. I know that Vegas isn't expecting a lot of wins. I myself, I'm claiming 7-5 right now. I know it's not a boatload of wins, but nevertheless, that'd be frustrating to lose to Indiana. And as we get to the last 2 games, this one I've categorized as a balloon deflator. Florida Atlantic to start the season, would deflate a lot of balloons out there. Look, Michigan State right now per FanDuel, 12-point favorites. You see 12-point underdogs win every week. It just cannot happen at Spartan Stadium in week 1 if we're going to get this fan base fired back up for this next chapter of Michigan State football. And then the last is you will never hear from me ever again if they lose to Prairie View A&M. I'll just take up being a Sherpa in the Himalayas should they lose that game. Or this podcast just turns into a full-time gymnastics podcast. I don't know. We'll see where it will fall should they lose to Prairie View A&M. But yeah, there we go. That's a frustration factor right there. Folks, we will be back later on this week. We're going to be talking about tiers, where Michigan State falls in the Big Ten, a little bit of hoops talk. But until then, take care of yourselves. Love you all. Go Green.